Welcome back. We are examining Amendment 4, which would restore a woman's right to have an abortion up until viability, which most doctors agree is around 24 weeks, taking Florida back to where it was before Roe was overturned. Today in Florida, a woman cannot have an abortion after 6 weeks, when many women don't even realize they are pregnant. Here now is the story of one of those women.
A new abortion law goes into effect today in Florida, sharply restricting the procedure after 6 weeks.
Now, almost every state in the South has restrictions on the procedure. In most of those states, it is nearly outlawed.
I sat in the waiting room of a clinic in Florida and watched people being sorted into groups based on the difference of a few millimeters of growth on an embryo the size of a pea, right? Whether they were 6 weeks 1 day and they were too late, or whether they were 5 weeks 4 days and they could get an abortion still in the state of Florida.
This ban is not going to stop Florida's women from getting abortions. It just means that those who don't have the resources to travel out of state won't be able to get abortion.
You have to travel many, many miles all the way to North Carolina if you want access to an abortion.
Why are you doing this?
I just feel like I need to share my experience, the hurdles I went through to have to even get an abortion.
For this story, we'll call her Ellie. She is 22 years old, and since Florida's 6-week ban went into effect on May 1st, she is one of more than 1,000 women who have had to leave the state to receive an abortion. And like so many of those women, Ellie didn't even realize she was pregnant until it was too late to do anything about it under the new law.
I didn't have symptoms that I would think would be pregnancy, and I was like, let me take a test just to make sure. And I took it and it said pregnant. I was so scared, like really scared.
The next day, Ellie's mom drove her to an abortion clinic here in South Florida.
So I do want children in my future, but at the time I just knew it wasn't the right time for me to have a child. Emotionally and financially, I could not take care of a child. I also just graduated college and didn't have a job yet.
Ellie and her mother both assumed she was early in her pregnancy and that the 6-week ban wouldn't be a factor. But inside the clinic, she was given various tests, including an ultrasound, to determine how far along she was in the pregnancy. A counselor took her to a private room and told her she was nearly 8 weeks pregnant. As they're explaining this to you, and you're realizing you're going to have to leave the state, what's going through your mind?
Well, first telling my mom that we had to do that. Just also financially, like paying for a plane ticket, and also I had already paid at this clinic, like the deposit, and having to pay again in Washington, D.C., and like the checkup after that. I could not afford that myself.
What do you think about that?
I think people are going to get pregnant anyways. Like, it's going to happen. People are going to have to have an abortion. They should not make it harder on the woman, especially since, like, the guys don't have to go through that. Only the woman does.
Her mother was waiting outside the clinic when she came out. Then you got to take that walk from the clinic to the car, get in the car with your mom, and tell her what's going through your mind at that point.
All the emotions. I was angry and I was crying when I came up to her, and frustrated.
Why were you crying?
Just because I knew what I had to do and how long it would take to actually finally get the abortion.
We asked her mom to join us.
I saw her face and when she walked to the car, and I could tell. And she was crying. So I knew what was coming. My heart sank. Yeah, it was hard to know that she was going to have to go through this. And I'm sorry, it's very, it's hard. But I knew I had to get to work right away, and we bought the tickets right there in the car.
You went on your phone and actually bought the tickets in the car?
Yeah, yeah.
Bought the tickets.
Yep. And when I told my husband, I just broke down. Yeah. That was very, very sad for her. I just felt like somebody just reached and took my soul out, really. Because I knew it was going to be difficult for her.
Across Florida, abortion clinics are spending more and more time helping women leave the state for an abortion.
Now we're doing navigation services. We're having to figure out for these patients, where will they go next? Where can they get an appointment? How long will it take? How will they be able to afford it? So that's become 50% of the practice.
It's now helping people to actually leave Florida to get the care they need.
Yes.
Eileen Diamond is the director of BSSI, an abortion clinic in Broward County. Since the 6-week ban went into effect in May, the clinic has helped more than 260 women travel to New York or Virginia or even Puerto Rico to have an abortion.
All of them should have been able to have an abortion in our state. There's nothing different happening. It's not like they're not getting an abortion. They're still going to get it, but you're punishing the woman.
Since the 6-week ban went into effect, the number of abortions performed in Florida has dropped significantly. In April, the month before the ban went into effect, there were 9,730 abortions in Florida. In May, it dropped to 5,630, and in June, to 5,200. It is impossible to know exactly how many Florida women have been forced to travel to other states for an abortion, but a survey of clinics by CBS News Miami suggests the number since the beginning of May is likely several thousand. For Diamond, telling a woman she is not able to get the care she desires in Florida because of the 6-week ban is difficult.
The women are devastated. They're upset, they're angry. Some patients have become violent. They've slammed down their paperwork, they've yanked things off the wall. You can't account to how somebody's going to accept this news. Some people, you feel like they're melting in front of you. They just don't know where to turn. People who are choosing to have an abortion are doing it because they feel that they really need it.
Yvonne Schmergel has worked at the clinic for 15 years and is often the person who must first tell the woman she is beyond the 6 weeks.
In one afternoon, I had to speak to 5 women and tell them, I'm sorry, we're unable to help you in the state of Florida. Some of them are very upset emotionally because they're going through their head, I can't believe I have to go out of state. And they have hardships. And they say, how am I going to afford this? What am I going to do? And every time that happens, I go through those same emotions myself.
It's a race. It's like if you're constantly in a race to try to beat that date. And when you have to sit down and tell somebody, listen, you're over by a day, you're over by a week, you're over by 2 weeks, we're still talking about a pregnancy that is very early and very small. And often they have just detected it themselves.
I think there's a lot of people who don't understand how the 6-week is defined.
Nope. When you look at the date of the last menstrual period, 2 weeks later when you have conception, those are kind of lost weeks, but they're part of the way that you figure out the dating on a pregnancy. So at 6 weeks, it means that they've only gotten pregnant 4 weeks before. And anything past that, 6 weeks, 1 day is too far along. So yes, you're telling them, yes, we know that you conceived on this date, but we have to add these other 2 weeks.
Let's go through that again. A woman may know the exact date she conceived, let's say August 15th. When she eventually discovers she is pregnant, she may think she has 6 weeks from that date or until September 26th to end her pregnancy. But in reality, the 6-week clock actually started on August 1st, which was the first day of her last period, which means instead of September 26th, the 6-week clock is up on September 12th.
It's a terrible moment. We try to give them time to adjust to that and let them think over their decision. Most of the time they say, you know why I'm here? I'm here because I went through the hard work already. I've already had that conversation with myself, and in my heart, this is the best thing for myself, for my family.
Ellie and her mom were both in disbelief as they boarded the flight in early September from South Florida to Washington, D.C.
I just felt so wrong the whole time. Like, it's so crazy that I have to even, like, flee the state. to do this.
When they arrived at the D.C. clinic, they say the waiting room was packed, and every woman there had their own story about why they made the choice to end their pregnancy. Can you imagine going through what you went through by yourself?
No, not at all. It's not even a thought in my head that I would have gone through that by myself. I just could not have done that.
And yet so many women in Florida are now having to do that.
I think it's just crazy. I think they deserve to be in a place where they're comfortable, to go through something so personal, and like, it's their own health, no one else's.
Your family is fortunate because you were able to come together as a family and support each other. You can also imagine a lot of women not having that support, and imagine what this is like for them.
That was my constant thought, was how is this fair to women? How many girls have just walked into this clinic and don't have these options, don't have her parents, even younger than my daughter is. That's all I could think about, was how unfair this was. The situation that we were put in was that 6-week abortion ban, how unfair it was.
While they were in Washington, D.C., Ellie's mom learned that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed a lawsuit seeking the medical records of Texas women who have left the state for an abortion. Florida has not followed suit, but it worries both Ellie and her mother, which is one of the reasons why they asked for their identities to be hidden.
We don't know how far this is how far they're gonna take it. I mean, they got rid of Roe versus Wade, and some states don't have any exception for abortion. So it's scary. It's quite scary, and we are, her father and I are very concerned about her safety because she decided to get health care. I hate saying the word abortion because it really gives it a negative connotation when it shouldn't. It is health care, and it's if you don't have that health care, women are going to be thrown back to the time where we had no choices.
You've never told this story before.
No.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Elaine Bloom, a little old lady on Miami Beach.
Elaine Bloom is more than just a little old lady on Miami Beach. She was one of the first women ever elected to the Florida House of Representatives.
I first started in 1974 when only 12 women, I believe, had ever been elected to the Florida House of Representatives prior to that year. So it was a tough road for women to come into the Florida legislature, but I'm very glad that I was able to do it.
The 87-year-old Bloom is not here, however, to reminisce about her years in Tallahassee. The story she's come to tell is a far more personal one, a story she has never fully told before.
I was going to go in July of 1971 for the founding meeting of the National Women's Political Caucus, and I had a ticket, and instead I had to fly to New York to get an abortion because I was already bleeding with an early pregnancy.
In 1971, 2 years before the Supreme Court decision in Roe, a doctor would go to prison for performing an abortion in Florida.
This was not a planned pregnancy, but I suddenly had a lot of bleeding, and it was confirmed by the doctor that this is what was happening, but that it was not going the right way. The doctor felt that I should not continue this pregnancy, so he recommended that I go to New York.
What you did in 1971, having to go to New York, in essence, you're what is now being referred to as a medical refugee. You had to leave your state to go to another state to get the health care you needed.
That is correct, yes. When I had to go to New York to receive the care, the medical care that I needed, but couldn't get here in Florida, I was a medical refugee.
Bloom said in many ways she was very lucky. Her husband could travel with her to New York, and she had family in Miami who could watch her 2 young children.
When we went to New York in 1971, July 11th, 1971, for that procedure, I remember the tremendous feeling of gratitude that I was in a position to be able to do this. You know, I had some other serious medical conditions to deal with in years prior to that, and I didn't want to hurt my body in any way. I wanted to be able to be a strong, healthy mother to my children.
Bloom also recalls what happened during another pregnancy.
In 1962, I had a 5th-month miscarriage. I was told when I went for a regular checkup that the pregnancy was no longer viable and go home. It'll happen in a few days by itself, and bring the products of conception with you and meet me in the hospital so I can do what is necessary to clean out the procedure.
So rather than, in 1962, rather than deal with it at the time as they should have, they just sent you home?
Yes, and this was really terrible to do that to somebody, knowing that it's going to happen. And what do you do? How do you handle it? And I had to do it in my own bed.
"60 years later, women across the country say they are facing the same horrors. A recent Associated Press investigation found scores of women turned away from hospitals afraid of helping them because of abortion restrictions in their state, including a woman in Florida who ended up having a miscarriage in a public restroom. In an interview last year, State Senator Lauren Book described another woman.
The woman was 18 weeks pregnant when her water broke and the pregnancy was no longer viable. She could not have an abortion. She needed to wait because there was no imminent risk to her health to go home and develop sepsis before they would take the pregnancy. What world do we live in that we are telling women to go home and develop sepsis? What kind of third world care as the government stepped in and told women what they can and cannot do with their bodies and put them in harm's way to receive health care that they deserve?
What you're describing, what you went through in 1962 and then again in 1971, is what women are dealing with now.
Right this minute, women are dealing with it.
When the Supreme Court finally did adopt Roe and accept Roe and made abortion legal in the United States, did you think what you had went through was in the past and would never be dealt with again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that the women of this country never expected this to come back to haunt them again.
I know exactly where I was the day Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I just never thought it would happen to me.
When it was overturned, what did you think?
I was scared for everyone in Florida, especially all my friends. We always are open about scares and stuff, so I was always so scared that they would have to go through that.
And then it turned out to be you.
Yeah.
For Ellie and her mother, the flight back to Florida from D.C. was a quiet one. What was the plane ride home like?
I think it was relief.
Yeah, relief.
It was relief. It was knowing that she could get back to her life.
Feel like myself again, because I was not feeling like myself before that.
I think it made her grow up, obviously, and mature. And I think it lit a fire in her that I don't think she knew she had. I mean, just the fact that we're sitting here right now, that she wanted to do this, and put her voice out there, I just think there was no way that my daughter of, 3 months ago would have even thought about going on TV and having this conversation. There's no way.
And you can hear that newfound fire in Ellie's words.
I think that they're just trying to control women in general. I don't really think it's about the baby or the fetus. I think it's just to control women.
When we come back, we will be joined by Dr. Grazie Christie, who opposes Amendment 4. Stay with us.